Without wasting any more time, let's move straight on to the next conversation. Brian Richardson's the MD of Wizzit. Wizzit states on its website that its vision is to provide mobile banking for the unbanked. His business operates in 6 countries with 9 banks, services a variety of platforms. And what we wanted to do was offer you not just food for thought, but a man who's been there, done that, suffered, shook his head vigorously when Martijn said, don't worry about the regulatory environment. So please welcome Brian Richardson. Thank you, Brian, for joining us this evening.
Thank you and good evening. And I'm going to speak quite quickly because I think I've got about 7 minutes. So I'll try and cover as much as I can. Before I make a complete fool of myself, I'm going to work under the assumption that everybody here has got a bank account. Anybody here doesn't have a bank account? If I had to challenge you on the, whatever it is, 28th of July, between now and the 31st, now on Friday, I'd like you to close your bank account. Cut up your credit cards, cut up your debit cards, throw away your checkbook, cancel all your debit orders. And just for the month of August, not for the rest of your life, so don't panic, just for the month of August, live only on cash. Anybody up for that challenge? And I'm not saying that you jump up out of bed every morning, rub your hands with glee and say, goody, goody, I'm going to the bank today. That's not what I'm suggesting. But without banks, our lives would be incredibly difficult. We live on a continent of over 1 billion people. The reality, 700 million people on this continent do not have access to even a basic bank account. I remind you, ladies and gentlemen, we are in 2015, not the dark ages. This is insane, actually. I was in a country, it doesn't matter which country, a young entrepreneur. I know nothing about sewing. She had a Singer sewing machine. Some of you may remember those old handheld things. I remember my mother having one of them. She started a business with one of those. She progressed to an electric sewing machine and wanted a more industrial capacity sewing machine. Cut a very long story short, she went to an MFI. She has no track record. No bank is going to give her a loan. So she goes to a microfinance institution. She got the loan. The problem was that to repay the weekly installments, she had to close her business. 45-minute taxi ride to the MFI, 45-minute taxi ride back, a minimum, I went there, minimum of an hour and a half to 2 hours standing in a queue waiting to do that weekly loan repayment. For the mathematicians here, you can work it out. Roughly half a day's production lost. She sewed together garments, cutouts that she got from a factory. She got paid for every garment that she gives back, completed. They were toddlers' garments. She makes 1,200 garments in a day. 600 lost because she doesn't have a bank account to make a simple repayment. I say to you, the lives of millions of people are impacted. 12 years ago, when we launched, we were told by CEOs of the major banks in this country, we'd lost our marbles. Nobody in their right mind would ever do a financial transaction on a phone. We were told that. I don't know, how many people here in this audience use mobile banking? It surprises me because I honestly thought that you, the banked people, were spoilt for choice. You had so many different instruments with which to pay, debit cards, private bankers, internet banking, you name it. Hence, we focused on the mass problem, which was the unbanked. But it's not that easy for the unbanked to get a bank account. It's been touched on, attitude. I don't know of any field of endeavor, person, business, politicians, religious leader, you name it, that has been successful without 2 critical ingredients, passion and enthusiasm. And if you don't have passion and enthusiasm for something, my honest, sincere message for you, don't even try it. It's not going to succeed. Yet, from a regulatory point of view, we're talking about money. We're talking about banking. And I do believe it needs to be regulated. But I think, true to form, we've taken a sledgehammer to kill an ant, and at the risk of being controversial, I ask the question with tears in my eyes. a farm laborer in Groblersdal who's earning $200 a month, how much funding of terrorist activities is he actually going to do? How much money laundering is he actually going to do? Yet, he cannot open a bank account because of regulation. For my sins, I sit on some of the FATF subcommittees, and we have adopted a more risk-based approach, but still one of the major barriers and obstacles. Talk about ecosystem. Suddenly today, the world of mobile banking, and there's a lot of hype around it, but every man and his dog is interested in it. The banks are actually waking up to it. The mobile network operators think this is a wonderful opportunity. Their eyes light up like Christmas trees. Here's a great opportunity. The regulator watches it like a hawk. The technology companies you touched on Apple, PayPal, all of these are classed as technology companies, all vying for a place in it. The mobile transfer, the MTOs, the money transfer organizations, MoneyGram, Western Union, all looking at it. They're not going to get cut out and disintermediated. The card associations. I used to go to my favorite restaurant up the road. A couple of years back, I would pay with my credit card. Today, I go to that same restaurant and I take out and I pay with my phone. Do you think MasterCard and Visa are just going to sit back and say, gee, this is a neat idea, and not do anything about it? So this ecosystem, and I agree, we're looking at a partnership model and a cooperative model, is not that easy. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it, and we wouldn't have a problem of 2.5 billion people on the planet without access to financial services. We do need to start thinking differently about it. And that was our dream 12 years ago, to bank the unbanked of the world. And we can do it through technology. Martijn was talking about technology as an enabler. And it is amazing how much this has taken off. And just to give you some stats, in terms of transaction volumes, in 2015, $431 billion going through mobile channel, payments initiated via the phone. It's estimated that by 2017, that'll be $721 billion. Just at retail, $22 billion spent in 2015 originated by mobile. By 2017, that'll grow to $30 billion. In terms of e-commerce, a massive opportunity, $15 billion currently, but by 2019, will have grown to $270 billion. So huge, huge opportunities. In terms of number of users, 800 million registered customers today. They reckon, and if you believe Bill Gates, that he's been quoted a few times this evening, by 2030, that number will have increased to 2 billion. 265 implementations around the world in 89 different countries. If you had to ask who's winning the race, if there's such a thing, the mobile network operators seem to get all of the noise and all of the glory. The reality is that of the 800 million users of mobile banking, there are 100 million active users that have been opened by the mobile network operators. So a very small percentage, yet they tend to get all the publicity and all of the PR. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. This whole ecosystem needs to be managed. We have achieved some success. We partner with banks. As was said in the introduction, we're on 3 different continents. We're in 9 countries. We have an active client base of around 7 million customers that are using mobile, primarily from the unbanked and lower end of the market. We've got a huge amount of work that we still need to do. And this whole fintech space is incredibly interesting, incredibly exciting, and I think a heck of a lot can be done, particularly in Africa, as I say, the continent that we live in terms of bringing people into the economic circle. A colleague of mine once said to me, you can be a citizen of any country in the world, but it's almost impossible to be an economic citizen if you do not have access to even basic financial services. That is our dream. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Brian?
What about bank charges?
Yeah, it's a real thing. We try to make banking as affordable as possible. Obviously, our bank partners do choose to levy a charge, some of them. Some of them don't, in that they will say that they will make money out of other added value services. So we try and keep the bank charges down as low as possible. Our dream was to have no transaction charges at all. But we partner with banks. We can advise them. We can suggest to them different means that they go around their pricing model. But at the end of the day, they set their own pricing model. But we're trying to keep it as low as possible and to have as few mouths to feed as possible. And you can do it. You can get it down very low. And it's a good question. We took a viewpoint that regulation was actually going to become tougher, not lesser. I see in West Africa, I don't know if there's any people from West Africa, and I'll give you a very quick example. It is against the law to charge a bank customer a fee to make a deposit to their account. They cannot charge to make a deposit. However, if you have a mobile money account, typically driven by the mobile network operators, you can charge. So there's a disparity. You can't have two sets of rules for two service providers essentially doing the same thing. And I just believe that the regulation is going to become tighter. I do think banks, at the end of the day, will wake up to the fact that there's a great opportunity. Prompted by the fact that 5 years ago, maybe more, the banks, if I use that term loosely, had 100% of the payment space. Royal Bank of Scotland did a survey in the retail banking report, some of you will have read it. 2014, last year that had reduced to 75%. By 2016, that will have reduced further to 50%. So banks need to look up and say, do we want to be in this payment space? And particularly as it's affecting mobile.
Martijn?
What do you need from this audience to get your mission further?
Some excitement, some encouragement, access to funding is always an issue, I suppose, but more like-minded people in terms of creating that ecosystem. You know, we've been very involved with issuing, signing up people to use mobile. There's a whole world out there in terms of payment technologies you touched on, in terms of acquiring mechanisms. You can have the best system in the world, but if the retailers aren't going to get on board, believe me, you're going nowhere. So you need to create that ecosystem, so it's help in that area.
One more in the interest of time.
Is your future vision to actually eliminate banks?
No. Yeah, I come from the banking industry, so I do have a vested interest
But you
in
could
it.
be a bank.
We are a bank in South Africa. We needed to prove a model. I think banking will change. I think the concept of branch banking will change, and I'm stepping on holy grails here in very sensitive areas. But 10 years ago, I said, yeah, the branch as we know it is going to cease to exist. I've got 4 children. Not one of them, they range in age from mid-20s to mid-teens. Not one of them have ever been in the branch of a bank, ever. They've got no need to, no desire to. So the future of banks, I think, will change, but they will always be a place for banks. But I think they're going to have to, as Martijn said, maybe look at the way that they're structured and the services they provide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.